Here to episode of Chordplay. This is the Chords of Mahavishnu Orchestra, and of course we're going to be talking about John McLaughlin. And Mahavishnu Orchestra formed in New York City in 1971, shortly after John left working with Miles Davis. And they went on to become one of the most important and influential, fusion, prog, jazz, whatever you want to consider Mahavishnu Orchestra, because there is this kind of time frame, like in the early to mid 70s, where you had Mahavishnu Orchestra, Return to Forever, Tony Williams' Lifetime. Eventually, you had players like Allan Holdsworth that hit the scene. But this fusion era in the 70s is really, really inspiring and really different, because all these musicians were pushing, jazz and rock music forward and kind of, discovering this uncharted territory. And definitely John McLaughlin fits in with that group, players like Al Di Meola, of course Allan Holdsworth, Robert Fripp, from King Crimson. There's a whole bunch of those early kind of pioneers in fusion, and John definitely fits in that group of players. John McLaughlin's definitely well known and it's documented, with his work with the Mahavishnu Orchestra, but he's also worked with a whole bunch of musicians, whether it was a solo project or a side project or a collaboration or just a live appearance. But here's an image with some of the people that John's worked with in his career. Very impressive. For those watching that are already familiar with Mahavishnu Orchestra, then you know this music and you know what I'm talking about. But for those of you that are new to John McLaughlin or Mahavishnu Orchestra, keep in mind their influence was massive, and they inspired, bands like Rush, eventually Dream Theater. There's a lot of groups that, Dixie Dregs, Steve Morse, famous vehicle from the 70s. I'm a huge Dregs fan, but definitely you can hear some of that Mahavishnu, kind of influence even in the Dregs. So their influence is everywhere, and definitely if you haven't heard those early albums, that initial output, from around 1971 to 1974, Billy Cobham on drums, Jan Hammer on keys, phenomenal band for sure. The opening, that's Meeting of the Spirits, the opening track from the Intermountain Flame, and it's this 2-chord progression that's a big challenge, something like this. Interesting. There's some bizarre chords, kind of happening. So it's really just 2 chords. It's also flirting with Phrygian, big time. So if you're a Phrygian fan, play around with this chord progression and then kind of noodle and improvise over it, and it just fits Phrygian perfectly. But you've got this followed by this, which is very unusual. And definitely McLaughlin really seemed fond of this second chord. But the first chord there, that's an F sharp 7 flat 9. And you kind of hear it bounce up and it moves to this chord. So that's a G major 13 sharp 11. And that's definitely one of McLaughlin's favorite chords, because it appears in a few Mahavishnu Orchestra songs. But the interesting thing there is it fades in the beginning, so you don't really hear the first chord as far as a complete cycle. It's just a part of the cycle like this. And then you hear it bounce up to that G major 13 sharp 11. And the way I'm fretting that right there is it's challenging. And then I'm moving to this, which that's a big fret hand challenge. And I have seen some transcriptions where it indicated, you could use your thumb right there. But I just kind of prefer to fret it like that, which, like I said, it's a big challenge, but I'm challenging myself on purpose. And that's a tricky one, to keep it clean, because you've got open strings, combined with, fretted notes there too. But I love those chords, you know, very unusual. And we're going to see that G major 13 sharp 11 again. Next up is Laylas Dance, which is from Visions of the Emerald Beyond, and we're going to see that G major 13 sharp 11 in this song. Something like this. Challenging. So it starts with this, and that's an E minor 9. And you're kind of picking through it like that. And then you're going to follow that with that G major 13 sharp 11. And then it's just a little piece of A major, and I'm going to play it like this. And then you hear this bass note move from G sharp to G. And then it's A over G right there. And then it's basically a little piece of this F sharp minor 7. You could also think of that as A over F sharp, since we don't have the minor third in there, but that's basically what's happening there. So that's a challenging picking pattern for sure, and that chord progression, you know, is definitely a big challenge for your fret hand. Why I'm fretting it like that, you know, kind of doing that stretch pinky move. But that's to keep all the notes from those chords ringing, because that's one thing you'll notice with John's style. Even though there is an easier way to fret and produce those chords, to keep everything ringing and kind of get this droning kind of ambient sound, you have to fret it that way, you know, to be able to keep, you know, certain notes ringing while you're changing those bass notes around too. So keep that in mind while you're practicing these ideas. Up next is the opening track from Birds of Fire, you know, the very famous Mahavishnu Orchestra album. And this is another example of, you know, kind of using fingerings with these chords that may not make much sense, but it's to allow these notes to kind of ring, you know, against open strings. Something like this. This first chord, that's really unusual. So it's a G sharp 7, sharp 9, flat 13, which is a mouthful, but that's an earful too. G sharp 7, flat 9, or I'm sorry, G sharp 7, sharp 9, flat 13. And then you're moving that shape up a whole step, and now it's A sharp 7, flat 9, sharp 11 when you move that up like that. So there's your G sharp 7. It's really the top two strings open that are creating these weird, you know, tonalities in both of those chords. So that's G sharp 7, and that's A sharp 7. But it's those sympathetic, kind of ringing, droned open strings on top that really creates those kind of just, you know, spooky and mysterious sounds. That picking pattern's really unusual on there too. And then right there you'll hear it move, you know, from G sharp to A. And then you hear that low E in there too. So that's why I'm fingering it this way. That way I can keep that part of the chord down while I'm changing that root note or the bass note. And then move up a whole step and do the exact same thing. Unusual too. And speaking of unusual, this is the song Sanctuary, which is also from Birds of Fire, and these chords are really haunting and kind of mysterious. I'm a big fan of these kind of sounds. It's really slow and brooding, but something like this. So it's just, implied chords right here, but that's an E minor flat 9, technically. Because you've got the E, the G, and that F note, which is your flat 9. So E minor flat 9, and then you're going to hear it move up to E flat 9, because now we're moving that G to G sharp. And then you're going to move up and grab this, and that's basically a B flat right there, but that's going to be an E flat 5, flat 9. Go back to that E flat 9 right there. And then you hear it repeat. It sounds like the soundtrack to a horror movie or something. It's very ominous and mysterious and a little spooky. Definitely really cool. Okay, up next is the Dance of Maya, which is from the Intermountain Flame album, and this is this really unusual, guitar part. And it's just this twisting and turning and mutating, series of chords. So we're just going to look at a part of the intro just to kind of get you a taste of it. But it's something like this. Right there, because it just keeps kind of continuing on after that and continues to twist and turn those chords. So there's an interesting implied series of chords. It kind of starts with E7, and then you're going to basically hear this A flat major 7 sharp 11 right here, and that's kind of a common theme for this riff. So there's E7, A flat major 7 sharp 11, you're going to revert to just A7 right there. And then it's G flat major 7 sharp 11 right here, to G7, and then an F6, and a little piece of E minor 7, and then you're basically back to the A flat major 7 sharp 11 chord again. Really unusual. Kind of end with that A7 right there. Really weird riff. And like I said, it just keeps going. The last example is You Know, which is also from the Intermountain Flame album. I think this is my favorite, Mahavishnu Orchestra song. It's very simple, especially compared to some of the other songs we've already looked at. And it's, revolves around basic chords, and we're in 4/4 time, which I didn't even talk about the time signatures in the other songs we've looked at. Like Meeting of the Spirits is in 6/8, Lila's Dance is in 5/8, Birds of Fire I think is in 9/4, Sanctuary is also in 9/4, the Dance of Maya I think is in 10/8, but this is in 4/4, so there's nothing crazy, super crazy. It's just really cool, something like this, very simple. Starts very basic like that, and it just slowly starts kind of building and starts moving, and then more things start to happen, but it does open with that very basic progression, and that's just a partial implied B minor to A major, and then right here. And I've seen this written and performed a couple different ways, but I think this is actually what John's doing. He's playing the low E open, grabs that G note, and he actually kind of does a slight bend pull-off to the open E. And when he does that bend pull-off to the open E, he also picks that E octave right there, like this. So you're hearing this, but he really doesn't pick the octave. It's a pull-off and a pick note at the same time. And if you listen really carefully, I think that's actually what he did. that ring. And eventually you hear the bass and the drums and the keys, you know, kind of come in. And then later in the song, there's another, you know, kind of a variation of that tag like this. One more time there. And that's really cool. So that's basically E minor right there to D major, back to that B minor, A, and then that little E treatment with that E octave. Now you could also play that. I've seen actually people play it up here like this. But I don't hear those little shifts in there. I hear it all kind of seamlessly, you know, performed without this noise. You don't hear any of those little shifts or like little partial slides. So I think John actually played it right there. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with the Chords of Mahavishnu Orchestra, and I've talked to a lot of people, you know, students and friends and peers about John McLaughlin and Mahavishnu Orchestra, and I'm surprised how many people have no idea who this is. And they're like, who's that? And then you say, you know, John McLaughlin, and they know his name, but they've never, for some reason, really dove into this fusion, you know, boom in the 70s. And I love it. I think it's great. I'm a big prog rock fan. And I also, you know, studied and I love jazz too. So you start mixing, you know, progressive rock and jazz, and you come up with progressive jazz, or what people call fusion. And it definitely, you know, kind of perks my ears up and catches my attention, you know, where it's like, yeah, I like this. You know, it's edgy, and it's, you know, it's definitely very progressive, time signatures and these lush, interesting, you know, chord voicings and progressions. And then you're hearing, you know, parts of jazz kind of mixed with parts of rock, and it's all kind of, you know, combined together like in a blender. And when you pour that out, it's just, you know, it's really interesting. It's different. It's not pop music. It's not blues. It's not traditional jazz. It's not traditional, you know, prog rock even. It's something else. There's this kind of fuel, you know, behind all that music, and it's really inspiring. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Lila Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.